I never expected that seeking medical help for my dying child would lead me down a chilling path of disbelief and desperation. I didn't expect that in the middle of this emergency, Karen doctor refused to cure my dying kid. Claims he's just possessed. Here's how it all went down. My life was usually uneventful, but that changed the day my son Timmy fell ill. It was a bright Tuesday morning, the kind that usually promised a day of laughter and play, but not this time. Timmy was burning up with fever, his little body racked with coughs. I knew we had to see a doctor, and in place, that meant one person, Dr. Karen Smith. Dr. Karen was a character, known throughout our place for her stubbornness and unconventional methods. As I carried Timmy into her clinic, a sense of unease washed over me. The clinic was silent, save for the distant sound of Dr. Karen's voice from the back room. "Dr. Karen will see you now," the receptionist said, her eyes darting away from mine. In the examination room, Dr. Karen, with her stern face and piercing gaze, looked Timmy over. His cheeks were flushed, his eyes glazed. "He's very sick," I said, my voice trembling. "He needs help." Dr. Karen, after a brief examination, stood up straight and crossed her arms. "Your son isn't sick," she said with a confidence that took me aback. "What do you mean? He's clearly unwell," I protested. "He's possessed," she declared. "It's a spiritual issue, not a medical one." I was stunned. "You can't be serious. He needs medicine, not an exorcism." But Dr. Karen was immovable. "I don't treat possessions with medicine. It's against my beliefs." I pleaded, argued, and even cried, but she wouldn't budge. Frustrated and scared, I took Timmy home, praying he would get better on his own. That night was the worst of my life. Timmy's condition deteriorated rapidly. He was delirious, speaking in tongues, his body convulsing. In desperation, I called Dr. Karen, my voice laced with panic. "Please, Dr. Karen, he's getting worse. You have to help him." Her response was chilling. "LOL, he's just possessed," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Try an exorcism." I was aghast at her cruelty. "How can you say that? My son is dying." She laughed, a cold, heartless sound. "If you're not willing to consider an exorcism, I can't help you." I hung up, feeling a mix of rage and helplessness. The next morning, I rushed Timmy to the city hospital. The doctors there were appalled at his condition. They diagnosed him with a rare bacterial infection and started him on antibiotics immediately. As Timmy slowly recovered, my relief was tinged with anger towards Dr. Karen. Back in our place, I filed a formal complaint against Dr. Karen. But in a small town where everyone knew everyone, taking a stand against a figure like Dr. Karen was daunting. People whispered, some in sympathy, others in disapproval. Weeks later, I learned Dr. Karen was still practicing, unrepentant, and as obstinate as ever. The town seemed to have accepted her, but I couldn't. The memory of her mocking voice haunted me. LOL, he's just possessed. I decided to leave our place, to escape the shadows of that terrifying experience. As I drove away from the town, with Timmy healthy and sleeping in the back seat, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Dr. Karen's words echoed in my mind, a bitter reminder of the ignorance and arrogance we had faced. It was a repulsive end to our ordeal, but it was also a new beginning, away from the absurdity and danger of Dr. Karen's practices. Wow, this story gave me chills. Dr. Karen sounds absolutely terrifying. It's unbelievable that she would dismiss a child's serious illness as possession. Thank goodness the city hospital was able to properly diagnose and treat Timmy. Kudos to the parent for standing up against Dr. Karen's dangerous practices. This story serves as a reminder of the importance of seeking medical professionals who prioritize evidence-based medicine. As I sat in my room, surrounded by the fragments of a shattered family, I couldn't help but wonder if I was the villain in this twisted tale. Selling my prized possession, the PS5, had ignited a storm of resentment and bitterness. Little did I know the consequences of my actions were about to unfold in ways I could never have imagined. Here's how it all went down. My 15 male mom and dad met and briefly dated while they were both studying at university. My mom gave birth to me after they had broken up and had to sue my dad for child support. I was raised by my mom and had virtually nothing to do with my dad throughout my childhood. My mom was an international student, and her family cut ties with her due to the circumstances of my birth. Tragically, 2 years ago, I lost my mom to cancer, and thus I was placed under the care of my dad. My dad has remarried and has 2 sons, 5 and 7, with his wife. It wasn't a bad arrangement at first, but we were all essentially strangers. I was given a bedroom to myself and we shared some meals, but other than that, I kept to myself. About 10 months ago, I was lucky enough to score a casual job at an aged care facility as IT support. It was an easy way to make money as it involved installing and maintaining a dozen or so common PCs used by the residents, as well as running basic computing workshops. I ended up accumulating a lot of disposable income in a short time. Stupidly, instead of just keeping quiet about it, I furnished my room with a new TV, headphones, and a PS5. Obviously, this setup was of great interest to my 2 stepbrothers. Initially, my rule was that they could play the PS5 anytime I wasn't using it. but I would get first dibs if I wanted to play or use my TV. I was also very accommodating by buying an extra controller, which I didn't need, and several kid-friendly games that they wanted to play. I eventually had to change the rule to only play when I was there, because the 5-year-old destroyed one of my controllers by spilling juice on it. This is where the drama started. They complained to my parents, who then ordered me to place the PS5 in the living room. I refused, stating that I had purchased it with my own money. This led to their argument that I have too much money and should contribute to rent, utilities, and food expenses. I called their bluff and said, "Sure, draw up a contract and I'll get a lawyer to review it to ensure it complies with the Family Law Act." My dad then told the boys that he was going to buy a separate PS5 for them for Christmas, but he is clueless about the global shortage. Finally, last night, after realizing that he had zero chance of buying one for close to the recommended retail price, my dad threatened me to either voluntarily gift my PS5 to the boys for Christmas or he would throw it in the bin while I was at school. I was so angry that I went on Facebook Marketplace and sold the PS5. The boys found out today and were devastated. I feel really bad because they shouldn't be punished for this situation. My parents are in their room talking about me, and I'm sitting here in my room. Am I the jerk? How could I have handled this better? I'm at work now, but my stepmom had a chat with me this morning and it was quite positive. She said she didn't know about my existence until right before I came to live with them, and so it caused a huge rift between her and dad. She apologized for projecting that onto me and not being more welcoming. She also didn't know about my dad's threats and told me that it won't happen on her watch. My half-brothers also admitted to her about the juice incident. She said that she is going to get the boys a Switch for Christmas, and she offered to pay me the difference between recommended retail price and getting a new PS5. I probably won't take the money, but at least it's a step forward. This was the longest conversation I have ever had with her too, by the way. No communications from my dad yet. To answer some common questions, my bank account is entirely in my name only. Australia. No one else has the ability to view or access the balance. I actually don't think my dad's demand for rent was about money. They both earn a good salary. He's just upset that I'm not reliant on his money. Yes, I really am 15 LOL. I typed out my post in Word so that it could be spell and grammar checked. Maybe that's what confused people. I get $AU 27. $50 an hour on a casual contract with additional loading for weekends, public holidays. The operations manager at the aged care facility is super chill and allows me to schedule my hours around school. I just have a cap that I can't go over. She lets me do my homework on the clock and I get free meals from the cafeteria. If I help the residents on non-facility devices, they usually tip me, in cash or sometimes cookies, LOL. I've got a fair bit saved up because I don't really have any expenses. I've got a shoebox of documents from when my mom passed. I think my mom's assets are looked after by a trustee firm which will be turned over to me at 18. The law firm managing the will had previously explained this to me, but I wasn't really paying attention at the time. I've still got to go through everything. I sold the PS5 for a tidy profit, even with the cost of the damaged controller. I'm not desperate for one at the moment, so I'll just sign up for a waiting list again, so I won't need to take up my stepmom's offer. So we have a gathering with the extended family today. This is the first time I've met any of them due to COVID, and they've all been super lovely to me. My stepmom showed them my original post, and they are all getting upset with my dad. My uncle, Dad's younger brother, has set up a Reddit account for him, and he's doubling down as he thinks Redditors will take his side when they read his account of it. I'm not going to link or read his post, but people have been telling me it's quite intense. The continuation is from the father's perspective. A few days ago, my biological son Jonah, not real name, posted a biased and frankly defamatory post about an incident in my home regarding a PS5. My wife was kind enough to share the post and comments with our entire extended family at our Christmas gathering. So apparently, now I'm a huge jerk. My brother suggested that I post here to set the record straight and give people both sides of the issue. Firstly, I never actually intended to charge Jonah rent. His job gives him essentially 100% disposable income purely because he lives in our household. He used this money to deck out his room, buy brand shoes, buy the latest iPhone, etc., all for himself. I couldn't care less about how he spends his money, but it does set a poor example for my other two boys. The last straw was when Jonah set a login password for the PS5. I basically told him that if he's not willing to share, then why should I give him a free ride? My son should be grateful. While we share DNA, I only dated his mom, May, not actual name, for all of 5 months back in university. I was very clear with May that I didn't want kids, but apparently consent doesn't go both ways. May put me through legal hell and ended up costing me tens of thousands of dollars over the years in child support, setting my own goals back. Instead of letting Jonah end up in a group home, I stepped up and took him in when May got sick. Instead of gratitude, I constantly have to deal with disrespect and attitude. Because of Jonah, my wife thinks I breached her trust all for something that happened well before I met her. While the boys previously did have access to the PS5, he now won't let them play it now that school is finished for the year unless he's home, which he never is. I gave him the ultimatum of either sharing the console or no one gets to play it. In response, he pulls the most passive-aggressive move ever and sold it, so now no one plays it. So listen, how am I the jerk here? I've taken in this kid into my home, a kid who, by the way, will receive a sizable inheritance in a few years thanks to May's estate. I've given him a home, a family, and funded his lifestyle, all at the cost of my own relationship. In return, I haven't asked for a cent, and he won't treat me with respect nor follow my rules. But somehow, I'm the giant jerk who's in the study typing this out instead of enjoying Christmas with my extended family. Instead of attacking me, I'm hoping people will now give their fair opinion of the situation based on seeing both sides of the story. I want to be clear, I never threatened to collect rent from Jonah. I don't need his part-time work money or his inheritance money. I make a very good salary, probably more than the vast majority of people who use Reddit. I simply tried to explain to him that he has all this disposable income because he doesn't have to worry about basic needs. I didn't explain it properly at the time because we were arguing, but my intention wasn't for Jonah to give his PS5 to the kids permanently. I just wanted it kept in the common area until I can buy another one for the kids. Jonah never told me about the controller. If he had, of course, I would have replaced it. That's not an issue. I expected him to not be so selfish to his brothers. Keeping it in his room under password protection is so rude. Jonah gets home really late most days, so my kids are in bed by the time he gets back. I won't debate the nuances about sex and custody. I'm not an idiot. I understand perfect consent and parental responsibilities. I will just say that there is a large gap between consenting to sex versus consenting to having a child. I get that our current laws are against me on this one. I didn't intend to lie to my wife. Jonah and May were something way into the distant past for me. Our settlement agreement was very clear on that. I had absolutely zero communication with May or Jonah for at least 10 years prior to finding about her illness. My child support was at a fixed rate, so I had actually paid her out a lump sum that was supposed to take care of him until 18. It wasn't like it was getting taken out of pay every week. As far as I knew, I was never supposed to hear from Jonah or May ever again. Why would I tell my wife about something like that? My eldest son, 16, is undergoing a hormonal-fueled rebellious phase. His behavior consists of things like rolling his eyes when I talk, back-chatting when I tell him to do something, overemphasizing putting on his headphones when I enter the room, and a whole laundry list of other passive-aggressive behaviors. It was his birthday yesterday, and he was going to go out with his friends this weekend to celebrate by paintballing. However, when I got home from work yesterday, I noticed that he had failed to do some chores I had set for him, and then did the whole headphones routine when I started telling him off for it. I got so sick of his attitude that I threatened to ground him for 2 weeks, which means not letting him leave the house except for work. My words clearly cut through his headphones, and it dawned on him that he would not be allowed to go paintballing this weekend. So he took off his headphones and said, "Go fudge yourself," and then shut himself in his room. This naturally led to his actual grounding. The grounding didn't seem to faze him as he spends a lot of time in his room anyway. I cut off his devices from our home Wi-Fi, but he works around this by having his own hotspot. He refused to come out for dinner last night when my wife asked him to and has basically barricaded himself in his room. At 10 p.m. last night, he ordered himself a meal via a delivery app. Again, he has clearly been passive-aggressive here, flaunting his independence as he has a perfectly lovely meal in the fridge made by my wife. I was still up watching TV, so I intercepted the delivery and ate the meal myself. At some point, my son must have come out and seen me but retreated back to his room without saying anything. My wife thinks I am a major jerk for eating the meal, but I think it comes part and parcel with the grounding. My wife also thinks I'm too harsh due to the grounding. I'll let him go to paintball if he apologizes. So am I the jerk here? I'm sure many of you would be ecstatic to know that my marriage may be over. I came home this evening to find that my wife and my 2 younger boys have left, probably at her mother's house. My oldest is still staying at my brother's house since the beginning of January. This has hit me hard, as Redditors now like to remind me on a daily basis. I now know I have been a shitty husband and father. I have some self-reflection to do. I am stubborn, but my wife has always been there to talk me down. I guess she has had enough. The only communication I have is a text from my wife saying she wants a divorce and that her lawyers will get in touch regarding separation arrangements. I have tried calling, but it keeps going to voicemail, same as my in-laws. I want to apologize. I want to offer to go to counseling or therapy like she asked. If I still can't get through to her via phone, I am thinking of going to my in-laws' house. I have to try to at least talk to her. My wife, female 29, and I, male 34, of 8 years, had been having serious relationship issues over the last few years. The main area of friction between us is that I have a son, male 16, from a previous teenage fling that I never told her about. We also have another 2 young children together. My 16-year-old had to come live with us about 3 years ago because his biological mother died. His presence in our lives caused a lot of tension between my wife and me because she felt I majorly breached her trust. We argued more and more about minor things until last Thursday I came home to an empty house. I am devastated. My wife is the love of my life and has always been the main support center in my life. I tried calling her, but she kept sending me to email. She sent me a text saying that she wasn't ready to talk, but was filing for a divorce, and to wait to hear from her lawyers regarding separation mediation. I am a wreck. I would do anything to have her back, including counseling and therapy. She had previously asked me to attend, but I was too arrogant to take it up. I felt that if I could just talk to her, I can have a chance to explain, and we can get through this. The next day, I did something stupid. I went to her workplace, accounting firm, with her favorite takeaway lunch to try to talk to her. She must have alerted the reception staff because they adamantly refused to buzz me into the office. Her staff even went as far as calling for building security. Not wishing to cause further drama, I left voluntarily. That night, I doubled down on my stupidity. I tried to visit her at her parents' house with a bunch of gifts for her and the kids. My mother-in-law answered through the intercom but wouldn't let me in. I was so frustrated and emotional that I broke down at their door, basically making a scene and refusing to leave. Later, my brother-in-law turned up. I assume my wife called. He tried to convince me to go home, but we ended up in a shouting match. He eventually tried to manhandle me back to my car, so I got into a physical altercation with him, but I left when my father-in-law came out and threatened to call the police on me. Things have really gone downhill since then. This morning, 2 police constables turned up to where I work with a provisional domestic violence order along with a summons to attend court for a permanent order. I was in shock and, as a result, was inadvertently quite rude to the constables. This put them offside. I am a contractor working at a client site, and so when my client asked the constables what the matter was about, they said they couldn't say for privacy reasons, but then immediately handed out business cards with their Family Violence Liaison Unit title embossed at the top. So now my firm's senior partner has waved me off going back to the client site, and I may be fired. I feel like this is the wake-up call I needed. I know I have been a narcissistic jerk and am ready to change. What can I do to talk to her? To show her I am determined to be better. I don't want to just end it like this. I know that if I have a chance to explain myself, to apologize, to promise to work really hard on my marriage, to work on my narcissism, to go to therapy, to go to counseling, whatever my wife needs to forgive me, and we can get on with our lives. Our court hearing is in a few weeks, so I'm thinking of turning up early with some expensive jewelry and trying to talk to my wife before the hearing. My solicitor has told me this is a bad idea, but I feel like I need to do something. I don't want to negotiate with my wife across a courtroom. I just want to remind her how much I love her and how much she means to me. What can I do to win my wife back? Has anyone else been in this situation? I get it. It's over. You guys are right. I've messed up, irrevocably this time. I've lost my family and will likely lose my job. I've always tried to control everything in my life. It's worked for me in the past because my family is wealthy, and they've fixed things for me. But my wife and brother must have spoken to my parents because they said I can't use the law firm my family has on retainer for my domestic violence order or upcoming separation proceedings anymore. I'll hire my own solicitor as soon as things start opening. I'll seek mental help too. Most importantly, I'll leave my wife alone. The wife finds the post and responds on the son's account. Hi everyone. A lot has happened over the last few months. My stepmom has been reading all of these posts and comments. She saw that he's now saying that he will change and hoping to gain some sympathy of it. She emailed me this today to pass on to people can decide if he deserves any. I haven't edited it anyway, just copied and pasted it. Hi everyone. I'm not a Reddit user, but I have been following the messages that my stepson and my soon-to-be ex has written. I would also like to thank the hundreds of kind people who immediately saw through his nonsense and gave him some hard truths. I am also grateful for all the well-wishers to me, my sons, and Jonah. Apart from the few incidents last week, which isn't the complete picture by the way, he has stopped trying to contact me directly. But I am hearing from mutual friends that he is on a mission to garner sympathy, trying to lay blame for his life falling apart everywhere except for himself. I note that he is throwing a pity party for himself on Reddit too, hoping to get people to congratulate him on how much he has changed. Ha! I want to set the record straight that this man deserves no sympathy. I have been with him for 8 years. Yes, I realize that I am a naive idiot, and I take my part of the blame for not only sticking around but for having 2, now 3, incredible light of my life, adorable children with this man. I will lay out the autopsy of my marriage and let people judge for themselves. I met him when I was 21, a broke university student trying to make it on my own. I met him while working at my part-time job. I was taken in by his looks, his wealth, and his confidence. We got married within 3 months. I was stupid and vain, tricking myself into thinking he was the prince to whisk me off to a better life. After our wedding, the manipulation started. He wanted to convince me not to continue my studies. "You don't need to, babe. I'll look after you. You just look pretty and look after my house." After the birth of our first child, I took 12 weeks off for maternity leave. I was pretty established in my job then. He again tried to convince me to be a stay-at-home mom. He tried to gaslight me, saying that it's not fair on your son, and that his fondest memories as a child were with his mom at home. Throughout the marriage, he would constantly use his wealth as leverage. My dad, bless him, is a good tradesman, but a terrible businessman. Early on, my ex arranged a loan through his family trust to rescue my dad's business. My ex would then gently remind me of that fact every time we disagreed about something. He would constantly monitor my credit card usage. He would question me on certain transactions that weren't to his liking. For example, fashion, gym, hair, Botox, makeup, completely fine. But a latte and a muffin? Who the heck did you have a coffee with? He would constantly provide input on my appearance. As an example, he would show me pictures of celebrities and tell me that it would be nice if I dressed and did my makeup more like that celebrity. He would also make offhand comments about what I ate. "Are you sure you want to order that in a main size? Didn't you have a sugary drink already at lunch?" Or my personal pet hate: "I think my wife will have the salad tonight." At the industry awards or charity events we went to, he would tell me who I should talk to. I can't tell you how many inane, vapid conversations I've had with other spouses about the latest bags or some other nonsense winter collection. I once made a joke about him in front of some of his colleagues, and he scolded me like a child on the car ride home. You all know about him hiding Jonah's existence from me. What you may not know is that he lied about Jonah's mom and made her out to be a gold digger who tricked him into having a kid. This is why my initial reception of Jonah was definitely not warm, and I'm ashamed for it. He's a really decent and sweet boy, and is so kind and patient with my two boys. He deserves better than his dad. I can go on for pages and pages. This list doesn't even begin to describe the level of narcissism, manipulation, and control he had over me for the last 8 years. I know I am equally to blame for this, but I'm done with it now. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't confident enough. I didn't want to say no to a man who gave me everything. Even now, at weak moments, I feel myself start to miss him and wonder if I should just endure it. That maybe he'll change just enough that I may be able to live with it. But then his recent fake pity party nonsense snapped me right out of it. I don't want his money. I don't want him. I just want my kids and me to live our lives free of him. Father posted again, I had it all. A beautiful wife, gorgeous kids, an awesome house in the suburbs, a well-paying job, and a bright future. However, everything came crumbling down last week. While I was at work, my wife left with the kids, taking me completely by surprise. We had arguments like any other couple, but I never expected her to leave so suddenly. I provided for my family and thought we were a great couple, but sometimes things just don't work out. Now, I find myself alone in a house filled with nothing but memories and silence. The most painful part is that I feel like I could get my life back on track with a little effort. Unfortunately, my wife won't give me a chance to have a one-on-one conversation. The next time I see her will likely be in a conference room with lawyers. Maybe I've changed. Maybe we've both changed. All I know is that I still love her, and it hurts every day. I just want my life back. Recently, I separated from my wife, although the divorce is not yet finalized. We have 2 boys who are in primary school, and I have custody of them for 1 weekend every fortnight, from Friday to Monday morning. I work long hours, and every week my team goes out for dinner and drinks on Friday nights. These sessions are important for team bonding and are a critical part of my job. My girlfriend, Jane, 25F, is a primary school teacher at a different school from my boys. I recently filled out a form with my boys' school to designate Jane as a guardian for the purpose of picking up and dropping off my boys at school. I commute in the opposite direction to my work on Mondays, while Jane works at a school near our boys' school. With the current custody arrangements, it would only require 1 pickup and 1 drop-off every fortnight if Jane were to do it. Unbeknownst to me, the school sent the form to my ex-wife for her signature. Now, my ex is extremely angry with me. From my perspective, Jane is perfectly capable of looking after our boys as she is my girlfriend, a qualified educator, and the boys get along well with her. She only needs to pick them up, drop them off, and maybe look after them for less than 2 hours without me. My ex claims that I'm a jerk and accuses me of trying to evade my responsibilities. I don't believe that is fair. My ex is involving her lawyers to specifically write to me, stating that they prohibit this arrangement. I think she is overreacting because she is jealous. Am I the jerk here? My male 31 wife, female 27, and I have been separated for about 6 months, but not divorced. We were together for 10 years. We have 2 primary school-aged boys. She has more custody than I do at the moment because of my work schedule, but my aim is to work towards joint custody. We came to an agreement to split the school holidays between us. I have the first week, and she has the second. I had a great time with the boys during my week, playing games and watching movies with them at my new apartment. Just before my wife's week commenced, I asked if we could all do a few things together, like going to watch a movie or having a meal together. It would be nice for the boys to see their parents getting along after all. To my shock, my wife said that she had already booked a holiday for the boys, and that I would have no access to them for the entire week. Fortunately, my eldest boy told me that my wife had organized a cruise for them. To make things worse, it was the cruise that my wife and I talked about taking together when we were still together. I was admittedly very hurt that my wife would take my dream family holiday without me. Apart from my personal feelings, I was mainly concerned about the safety of taking two boys by herself. A lot can happen on a cruise ship. I didn't know if she is going to be alone or with a boyfriend or a group, so my main goal is to ensure the safety of my boys. I took time off work and also booked a cabin on that same ship. Luckily, there were plenty of vacancies. I don't want to be intrusive on my wife's time with the boys, but I thought it was a sweet gesture that at least I can look after the boys while she gets a massage or wants some time alone. I even got a VIP cabin suite so the boys can have room to sleep over. When I surprised her on the ship, she went ballistic at me. In fact, she screeched so loud that security had to intervene, and we were all interviewed separately by the head of security. The head of security seemed to immediately take my wife's side and told me to stay away from my family. But I mean, it's a ship. I've just been hanging in my room for the last few days, but I'm not sure if the direction from security is enforceable. Obviously, my wife has once again misinterpreted my nice gesture. I didn't go on the cruise to interrupt her trip, merely to make life easier for her to enjoy herself while spending time with the boys. The story highlights the importance of effective communication and empathy in maintaining healthy relationships. The father's actions and decisions demonstrate a lack of understanding and consideration for others, leading to conflicts and breakdowns in his relationships. My heart raced as I stepped onto the plane, excitement and anticipation filling my mind. Little did I know that this bachelorette trip, meant to be a celebration of love and friendship, would quickly descend into chaos. My mother, the supposed maid of honor, turned into my worst nightmare, tearing apart relationships and leaving me questioning everything. Here's how it all went down. So, a few months ago, I had a bachelorette trip to Puerto Rico. Two of my bridesmaids were able to go, and my mother and sister joined as well. I asked my mom to be the maid of honor, hoping it would bring us closer while preparing for my wedding. My main goal was for everyone to get along and have a good time. Little did I know it was going to turn into a disaster. A couple of weeks before the trip, my mother started criticizing my bridesmaids and friends, focusing on one in particular who was going on the trip. To ease the burden on my mom, I paid for her, my sister, and myself to fly to Puerto Rico. The plan was for my mom to cover the hotel expenses for herself and my sister. My friend took the initiative to plan something for me without my involvement. It's important to note that as the bride, I had already planned the bachelorette trip. When my friend reached out to my mom and spoke with her, my mom expressed her willingness to help. Since my friend is Puerto Rican, she would have been a great asset for the trip. At the time, I was unaware of this conversation. My mom called me at 3 a.m. after talking to my friend to inform me that she hadn't been fulfilling her maid of honor duties because she was observing everyone and everything. She then claimed that as the maid of honor, she should be the one planning the bachelorette trip. I found this conversation odd, but I agreed. I was relieved that she finally stepped up to help me. Before ending the call, my mom told me not to inform my friend about our conversation, which I also found peculiar. The following day, my friend called me and expressed her desire to ensure that I had a memorable bachelorette experience focused on me. She wanted to help with the activities I had planned, and I mentioned that my mom also wanted to be involved so they could work together. When I saw my mother the next day, she went on a rant about how disrespectful my friend was. She claimed she wouldn't let a little girl control her on this trip and refused to wear the t-shirts my friend had prepared. She became increasingly angry and insisted on taking an Uber instead of sharing a rental car with my friend. She said hurtful things about my friend, calling her disrespectful and claiming she had mental issues. Overwhelmed, I called my friend and asked her to cancel the rental car. However, she couldn't do so. I created a group chat for everyone attending the trip, and my friend asked questions about the planned activities and expressed her excitement. My mom and sister instantly became annoyed. My mom was supposed to plan the activities in Puerto Rico, but she refused to let my friend participate or help, despite her being Puerto Rican. Fast forward to the first day of the bachelorette trip. When we arrived, my mom's luggage, which contained all her toiletries, was missing. She was upset about it. After arriving at the hotel, I allowed everyone to rest since it was an early flight. My friend arrived later in the day, and I met up with her and another friend in the lobby. I called my mom and sister to meet us downstairs so we could go together to replace the lost toiletries and have dinner. As my two friends and I were waiting, my mom came downstairs and stood behind my Puerto Rican friend, saying hello in such a low voice that my friend couldn't hear her. I tried to hint to my mom that my friend was sitting on the lobby couch, but she ignored it. Eventually, my friend turned around and greeted my mom. My mom abruptly said she was leaving and told me to go be with my friends. Then she ran off, and my sister said nothing. The tension in the air was palpable, and something felt off between my friend and my mom. I asked my friend about it, and she explained that she didn't really know my mom, so she didn't understand the animosity. I decided to go to the bar with my friends and wait for my mom and sister to return. 5 minutes later, I received a text from my mom saying, "Shame on you. You betrayed your family. You chose a nobody over your own family. I am disappointed, and your sister and I are out of the wedding." I responded, asking what the problem was because I hadn't done anything wrong. But I was ignored. I started crying uncontrollably because I didn't want my bachelorette to be ruined. My friends tried to cheer me up and took me out to dinner. I decided to give my mom and sister some space and try to resolve things with them the next morning. I went to my mom and sister's room and knocked on the door multiple times, but there was no response. I also called them, but they didn't answer. I even waited in the lobby, hoping to bump into them, but they never showed up. Later in the afternoon, I called them again, and finally, my sister answered. I asked if everything was okay and if we could resolve whatever had happened so we could continue with our plans. I asked why they hadn't answered me earlier, and they claimed they were sleeping, which I knew was a lie because I heard someone peep through the peephole when I knocked earlier. My sister said they wouldn't participate in any of the planned activities and they were having lunch but refused to tell me where. I felt terrible. My mom hadn't planned anything she said she would. My friend even reached out to my mom, apologizing for whatever my mom thought she had done, but my mom didn't respond. My friends did their best to salvage the rest of the trip for me while my mom and sister were missing in action. The day before we had to leave and return home, my sister contacted me to request the plane tickets, which I had purchased. I sent them, but I was immediately upset. My mom asked me to put my credit card down for her and my sister's hotel expenses, promising to pay me back. However, I had a feeling she never intended to repay me because she is my mother. They ignored me throughout the entire trip and only demanded their plane tickets now. Frustrated, I decided to change my flight and leave earlier. I couldn't bear the thought of sitting on the plane with my mom and sister, pretending that everything was normal. When my sister called to ask if I was getting an Uber to the airport, I told her no, explaining that I had a different flight. Finally, my mom appeared and called me, saying hurtful things. She accused me of always being disloyal, misinterpreting everything, overthinking, not caring about her and my sister, and being a liar. Then she hung up on me. My friend eventually told me about the phone conversation she had with my mom earlier. She didn't want to tell me initially out of respect for my mother's request. My mom had spoken ill of me, my fiance's family, and how I was planning my wedding. My friend was put in an awkward position. Since that trip, I haven't spoken to my mom or sister, and they didn't attend my wedding. The only contact I have with my sister is to remind me to pay her and my mom's phone bills once a month. So, there's this crazy story about a bachelorette trip that goes completely off the rails because of the OP's mom. They were hoping for a fun celebration of love and friendship, but it turns into a total nightmare filled with tension and hurtful behavior. As I strolled through the aisles of the supermarket, little did I know that a seemingly ordinary shopping trip would turn into a nerve-wracking battle for my own wheelchair. The entitled woman's determined gaze locked onto me, her intentions unclear but her aggression evident. Here's how it all went down. So there I was in a rural Shaw's. For those not in an area with a Shaw's, it's a standard supermarket with a club that offers discounts, which is their way of hiding their markup. Stuff is just cheaper a few miles down the road. Unfortunately, there were a few things I could only get there, like my preferred caffeine flavor and food for the dogs. I was using my power chair, which back then I needed more often. It's an Eagle HD foldable model, and it works great. I had been greatly affected by post-COVID, and was very sedentary at that time in my life, along with a pre-existing joint problem. So I'm leaning forward to get a flat of Monster and place it under my seat on the rack when a woman pushes on my back and says, "I need that, you don't. You're younger." As I was belted in, nothing happened. It was only luck that I was belted in. Usually I would have undone it to pick up something heavy. I sat up and pushed her hands off of me, saying, "What the heck?" And she shakes the back of my chair like it's a dinner chair or something and goes, "You can use the scooter. The chair is better and I'm old." And she points at the lousy supermarket scooter she's using. I stare at her in total shock for a moment and say, "This is my wheelchair. Get away from me. You can't use personal stuff in supermarkets. Give me the chair." She started shaking it with each statement. So at that point, I just hit the maximum speed on my power chair and took off, ripping it out of her hands. It was either let go or be dragged on her face because she clearly wasn't super steady and needed a scooter herself. And we're off on the dumbest chase ever, mostly because supermarket scooters go slower than any other mobility device. I buzzed over to the service desk and cut the line, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, but there's a woman following me, trying to push me out of my chair and take it." And from behind me, they can hear, "Get back here," and the most wheezy buzzing of the slow scooter. In the moment, it was really infuriating that she was being so entitled and frustrating, and I just wanted to get my dog food and leave. But in memory, it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. They let me into the little back office area, and they and the whole line of people waiting just sort of watched as she came over. And it took so long. The scooter was incredibly slow, and she's yelling about how I don't need the chair and how she should get it because she's older and more disabled. It takes like a full 20 seconds for her to get from one end of the store to the other, and everyone is just staring as she rides slowly at 0.00001 miles per hour, with her face red and her glasses hanging off one ear. So she finally gets to the desk, and they calmly explain that the wheelchair isn't store property, and if she tries to steal from another customer, they'll have to call the police. She starts shouting at the employees that she knows full well you can't bring personal equipment into the supermarket, so they're lying. And the other woman behind the counter says with a bit more attitude, "Lady, why do you think we care if you bring a wheelchair into the supermarket?" At this point, I think something either clicked, or she just realized that an entire line of people were staring at her, and not kindly. She suddenly asked where to find the artichokes. I almost coughed on my own spit. The worker just stared back and pointed back where the woman had come and said, "Produce," and the woman left. I admit that for the rest of my visit, I avoided any aisle she was in because I didn't want her close enough to grab me again. Now I can laugh about it for the absurdist comedy moment it was. In retrospect, I feel there's a reason here. Like her husband told her they shouldn't buy a thing like I had because they're not allowed to be in the supermarket. That's the best answer I can possibly come up with for that wild nonsense. Wherever you are, crazy lady, I hope you bought your own Eagle HD. This supermarket encounter serves as a valuable lesson about respecting personal boundaries and understanding the needs of others. It highlights the importance of standing up for oneself and seeking assistance when faced with entitlement and aggression. The humorous twist at the end reminds us to find humor in absurd situations and not let negative experiences define our outlook. It also serves as a reminder to remain cautious and aware of our surroundings. If you enjoyed today's stories, check out the other videos on your screen now. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.